There's this really small but super unique group of people out there who kind of stand with a foot in two totally different worlds. One world was completely before the internet, and the other, well, it's been totally shaped by it. So today, we're going to unpack the psychology of this fascinating microgeneration, the Xennials.
I mean, seriously, can you remember it? That unforgettable shriek of a dial-up modem connecting? Or that feeling of having to wait a whole week to see your favorite show because if you missed it, it was just gone? For some of us, that feels like ancient history. But for Xennials, that was just childhood.
In this contrast, right here, this is the absolute core of the Xennial experience. They grew up with a slow, deliberate pace of the analog world, but then they hit adulthood just as the digital world exploded into existence. It's that whiplash, that unique transition that makes their psychology so darn interesting.
Okay, so Section 1, the in-between generation. This whole experience puts Xennials in a very, very specific spot in history. It's why some researchers call them the in-between generation.
So what exactly is a Xennial? Well, the term basically describes this microgeneration born right on the cusp between Gen X and the millennials. They're not quite one, not quite the other, and honestly, that's the whole point. Their identity is defined by this incredible technological shift they lived right through the middle of.
And we're talking about a pretty specific group of people here, individuals born between 1976 and 1985. So if that's you, then yeah, this whole explainer is pretty much about your unique journey.
This line really captures the core feeling for a lot of people in this group. It's this sense of being a bit of a cultural outsider. A lot of them feel they're too young to really connect with the whole cynical, grunge-era identity of Gen X, but way too old to feel like a true, digitally native millennial.
All right, Section 2, an analog childhood. To really get a handle on Xennials, we have to go back to the world that shaped their early years, a world that was completely, and I mean completely, analog.
Think about it. If you wanted to talk to a friend, you couldn't just fire off a text. Nope. You had to call their house, maybe even make small talk with your parents first, and just hope your friend was actually home. It was a whole different social dance.
Communication was physical, right? You'd pass these carefully folded up notes in class, this little secret language moving from hand to hand. There was no instant messaging, just the thrill and the risk of a little piece of paper. And this really gets to the heart of the analog experience. There was no on-demand anything. Media was an event. You had to be there at a specific time, on a specific day, or you just flat out missed it. No streaming, no binge watching. The moment was everything.
So this environment, it actually fostered a different set of psychological muscles. You had to have patience, right, to wait for a phone call back. You needed commitment to show up for plans you made days ago. And you really needed trust that your friends would be where they said they'd be because you had no way to check in.
Okay, Section 3. The world changed overnight. So just as Xennials were hitting their teens and young adulthood, like the most formative years of your life, everything changed. And it really did feel like it happened overnight.
I mean, look at this timeline. You go from a childhood with that slow, painful dial-up to your teen years when the first clunky cell phones show up. Then, boom, as a young adult, MySpace completely reshaped social life, and that's immediately followed by the total dominance of Facebook. In just a handful of years, the entire blueprint for how we connect with each other was rewritten.
So, Section 4, a unique adaptability. All of this rapid, dramatic change forced Xennials to develop a sort of psychological superpower, this incredibly unique and powerful form of adaptability.
Some researchers have a fantastic term for this. They call it a kind of mental bilingualism. It's this ability to think and operate fluently in two different languages, the language of the analog world and the language of the digital one. And you can see this bilingualism play out in two really key ways. Because they grew up without being constantly connected, Xennials often find it a little easier to unplug, to just put the phone down. But at the same time, because they had to learn all these new systems as they were coming out, they also got really comfortable adapting to new tech. This makes them a pretty critical bridge in a lot of modern workplaces. But, this bilingualism, it comes with a side effect. It can create this strange, nagging feeling of not quite belonging to either world. They remember what life was like before social media, but their adult lives are completely tangled up in it. They're always sort of standing on the bridge between two different eras.
All right, Section 5, the first digital adults. This is exactly why the Xennial role is so crucial to understand. They weren't just watching this change happen, they were the very first generation to have to figure out adulthood in the digital age. This quote says it all, doesn't it? Xennials are, basically, the last generation to know what a childhood free from the internet's influence felt like, and the very first to have to build their careers, their families, and their whole adult lives within its framework.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, maybe the Xennial experience teaches every single one of us a pretty vital lesson. In a world where change is literally the only constant, maybe the most important skill isn't knowing one specific piece of tech, but being able to adapt to the next one, and the one after that, all without losing your core sense of self.
And that brings us to a final question, just to leave you with something to chew on. Whether you're a Xennial or not, where do you feel like you belong more? In the focused, patient pace of the analog world, or the instant, hyper-connected digital one? It's a question that feels like it gets more and more relevant every single day.